Okay, so we're going to be chatting about your pose analysis and your assignment, which you'll be doing, breaking down some poses and having a look at what's happening in your own body. Okay, so I'm sure you saw at the end of the video and the end of the last video on your pose analysis, Catherine showed you some examples of what you'll be doing, right? So basically you're choosing 3 poses that you can't do or that you struggle with, or there's something going on that you don't quite understand. Okay. And you're going to break down those poses in terms of looking at things, flexibility, in terms of strength, in terms of skill work on what's happening in your body and how you're going to modify potentially to be able to do the pose. Okay. And you also have some examples in your course overview of everything you're doing over the course. There's also some examples there that a student has done, and she's taken 3 poses in which she's gone through. And so these are quite helpful for you if you get a little bit lost on what's required, just to have a scan at those and see kind of how it works. So basically, you're going to choose 3 poses that you can't do. You're going to WhatsApp me your 3 poses. So I can kind of just check, because I might say, no, that's way too easy. You can do that. Don't be ridiculous. Or after we do the pose review next weekend on Saturday, I might say, okay, Karen, I would really love for you to work on your plank or whatever it is. So I might also assign a pose to you if I feel that I want you to work on it a little bit more. Or maybe, Demi, I want you to work on your triangle to feel this, this, and this. Okay. So in the meantime, over the session and after the session, you can start to think a little bit about it. Go through the manual and have a look at the poses. Of course, I'll be covering more tomorrow and a few more next weekend. So before you have to submit this, we'll also have done a few bigger poses that often people choose to do their 3 pose analysis on. So often it's like a big back bend or a fancy arm balance or an inversion. So we'll also be covering those in more detail as we go along, that you'll have a bit more information. But maybe at this point you already have something in mind. Like Carmel had in mind, she wants to do her Warrior 3, which is always a great one to choose. Okay, but we're going to just kind of, so you'll choose those poses. I will agree on them. And then I think you have to submit these before the 1st of December. You have all the dates in your course overview and in your schedule when to send me your 3 poses. And if you have something in mind, you want to message me before then, please feel free to. But bear in mind, after next Saturday, I might also assign you a pose. But start to think about it already, just so that you can start thinking about it, because as the course goes on, you'll be doing more and more homework. Okay, so you'll be doing these 3 poses, and then you'll also start on your sequence, okay, which Taryn will talk to you about more, but that requires quite a lot of work and forwards and backwards and emailing. So it's nice to kind of start getting your head around these things early. Okay, cool. Caroline.
Is it any 3 poses? Any at all?
Absolutely any 3 poses. So sometimes it's something you might not even consider being a super advanced pose or something that's not very difficult, but for you, you really struggle with and want to spend a little bit more time analyzing and kind of figure out what is actually going on here. Any 3 poses. Anything you would like to choose. So it can be crazy, it can be simple. And also Bear in mind, you're going to be assessed. You also see in your course overview the list of poses you're going to be assessed on. And maybe also just do a scan through that and go, there's actually side crow for my assessment and I can't do side crow. So maybe you want to take something that's going to be assessed later on and use this time to work on it a little bit. Okay. But other than that, any poses you want. Any questions just on that? Zani?
Is this going to be like a music exam where you can maybe play 8 out of the 10 scales and you still pass?
You know, because it's Zani, I also understand everybody's body is different. So you're going to do the pose according to your body the best you can.
Okay.
And
okay,
I promise you, you're pretty much going to be able to do everything by the end of this within your own body's restriction or strength. You'll be able to demonstrate a version.
Okay, so let's say I really struggle with balance. So let's say I chose Warrior 3. If by the end of the time I still can't balance appropriately, will I fail?
No, absolutely not. Because we understand this is something maybe you're going to work on and improve on over time. Because sometimes things take a bit longer.
Okay, so we can choose something quite far ahead of where we are.
Totally. I encourage you to, so you really can explore it. The bigger the pose, kind of the more you have to work with in a way. Sometimes it makes it a bit, in some ways, a bit easier because you've got bigger movements and bigger actions in terms of strength and flexibility, which makes it sometimes easier. Then a simple pose is like you really got to think about what's going on there. But you'll start to think about it and go, what are the poses I need to, or like it might be something like half moon pose. It's in your assessment. Really struggle with this pose. I want to spend a little bit more time looking at what is actually going on. Is it the strength in my feet and my ankles for balance? Is it my flexibility that my hamstrings and inner thighs are tight that I can't actually get my hand to the floor? And then how am I going to modify this pose? How am I going to make it work? So you might try it with your back against the wall to take balance out of the equation. So you could look at the pose like that. Or you might put a block underneath your hand and go, okay, with the block, I'm able to balance easier. It helps my flexibility. And I found that I can achieve this pose better by modifying it in these ways for my body. And just on that note, if you take a pose and you analyze it and by the end of it, you still can't do it, that's also fine. So you might find, listen, my hamstrings just are not long enough to do full splits yet. And this is how far I've come. And maybe this is what I want to work on in future. And this is how I'm going to modify doing the pose for now. Because yoga's tough and you're probably going to take a pose that doesn't come easy to you. So it might not all happen in this short period of time. That's also okay. Or you might find I just don't have the strength for this yet. So I'll modify and play with maybe doing it on a chair or doing it with my feet on blocks. So I can still work the shapes and actions of the pose. But in time, I need more strength to be able to do crow pose with my arms straight, for example. So that's all part of the process as well. Okay. Any questions just where we are at the moment? Cool. So this is a huge link into peak pose sequencing. Okay. Taking a pose, breaking it down in terms of flexibility, strength, and skill work, knowing what you need to warm up to get more flexible or what you want to activate in terms of strength, or skill work to bring in as a bit of a theme, like for arm balances, looking forwards and leaning forwards. And that's what's going to help you construct a sequence, a peak pose sequence, which we'll be doing with Taryn. Okay, so this kind of is the next link to peak pose sequencing. This is how you're going to break down a pose to be able to sequence for it. Okay, Sasha.
Okay, I think I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but it ties in with this. I'm just wondering it's like my parents are super excited that I'm doing this because they both want to do yoga, but they don't do yoga. So like I was thinking the other day, I don't know what I would do with them because they've never done yoga. So what an easy peak pose would be. And then I was thinking, okay, but if we're doing pose analysis, then maybe it would just be like a modification of a pose instead of a full pose, or are there like sort of easier poses to choose from as a peak pose?
Yeah, so it's a really great question. And this is what's also so cool about peak pose sequencing. So firstly, yes, you can choose a somewhat easier pose. So taking like we do in our 3 poses that we sequence for now in your classes. So Warrior 3 can be an accessible pose, even though it's hard, but something you can work towards. Your crow pose is a beginner's arm balance, and then maybe mermaid, which is maybe a little bit of a step forwards. But all along there, Sasha, you can see you can take it just so far. You don't have to take it all the way to the peak pose. You might only get to like pyramid pose, and that would kind of, you'd stop a little bit sooner than getting all the way to Warrior 3. But also, if you choose a bigger pose, again, you can sequence and go through all the progressions towards getting to that peak pose, but maybe you wouldn't enter full splits at the end of it. But you can still work the shapes and actions leading up to that pose. Okay. So that's what's really exciting, because you want to make it progressive. You want to start small and then get bigger, harder, more and more and more until you get to your big pose. And depending on who you're teaching, you can just scale it down or up depending on how far you go. So, and that also is quite helpful because then now you've sequenced like a really hard class for something, and a whole bunch of beginners walk in and they can't even touch their toes, and you're like, oh great, we're not going to be able to do this. You can still flow through your sequence, maybe take it a little bit slower, and just take it only towards, less of the peak pose. Just dial it down a notch. So have you guys seen, and I think this is really helpful as well, Sasha, I should have got the page number. In your manual, you'll see there's all the categories of poses, which also really help you to understand categorizing poses into different sections. So if you look from like page 198, you will also see here this exact thing, progressive prepping and peak poses. There's such a nice visual guide this. I think it's so helpful. So you'll see there, your peak pose might be leading towards handstand, but all the shapes that are moving you towards getting into handstand could be a peak pose or a prep pose along the way. So you could have just taken your handstand sequence to Warrior 3, or you could have taken it a little bit further towards a standing split, or you could have gone all the way and done handstand, or taken it even further and do splits in a handstand, because you would have warmed up the same muscles because they're all under the same umbrella of that category of pose. Okay. And just lastly on that, when teaching beginners for the first time, Sasha, like your parents or like someone who's never done yoga before, often you'll just be teaching the sun salutations to them for the first time. There's actually a lot within that. Stepping back, learning how to do plank, moving into downward dog. Maybe you introduce a little chaturanga if you're feeling brave, or a baby cobra, and then moving forwards and back from the front of your mat. There's so much to actually just do within a sun salutation. So I recommend, if they want to start doing yoga, it's going to help you as well so much get ready for your final teaching prac, is teach them sun salutations. I recommend it for all of you. Find someone and teach them a sun salutation. And it's really, there's so much there. You can talk to them about where to place their bodies, how to step forwards, or maybe introduce like a low lunge or a high lunge, or maybe a little warrior two. And within a sun salutation, you have so much to teach. And that's what I recommend in the beginning with beginners, just sun salutations. Okay, cool. While we're talking about sequencing a little bit as well, how this ties in, one of your 3 poses you're analyzing, so you're breaking down and analyzing the pose, you can also choose one of those to do your sequence on. So say now you want to do, like the example Catherine gave you, that firefly pose where your legs are over your arms. Maybe you want to analyze that pose for yourself, but then because you've gone through understanding all the components around the pose, you can choose that again and do a sequence for Titibhasana Firefly as well. If you would like to save a bit of time, you can also sequence a completely new pose if you want, but quite often a pose that you're analyzing, you can also then use to do your sequence on, which I'm not going to touch on now. Taryn will go through that with you guys. But sometimes useful, you can use both of them. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. Alrighty. So is everybody happy with what is required of them? So you're going to take some pictures. So you've chosen your 3 poses. You're going to take some pictures of yourself in the pose, maybe where you're at now, and then kind of look at it. Oh, I need to lean forwards more, or oh, I need to bend my arms more, or whatever the pose may be. And then take another picture and then have a look and see if you've managed to change anything, okay? Maybe you want to bring in a prop like a block to assist you, or a wall to help you balance on, and you're going to investigate what is going on. Can I help my hamstrings because they're a little bit tight? So if I bend my knee, I'm able to do this more. Or if I use blocks, I'm able to straighten my leg because I'm upright a little bit higher. And you're going to take pictures of yourself through this process and having a look at yourself, because soon you'll be doing this for your students. You're kind of just going to use yourself as the example and break down what is happening in terms of flexibility, strength, and skill work. And I'm going to give you some examples now for us to run through so we can kind of play with that a bit as well. And then modifications or progressions of the pose, making it a bit easier, or using props, or finding other ways to do it. Okay. You can put that all in a document if you're okay to do that, taking your pictures like you've seen in the examples and writing what you've seen or what you've explored or what you've analyzed. When I do Warrior 3, my back leg doesn't straighten. So I'm going to do it like this. Take another picture. With my fingers at the wall, now I don't have to worry about balance so much. I can focus on having my back leg straight. Boom. Now I'm going to try it like this. And you're going to kind of just describe, like you see in those examples, which are really helpful, what's happening. Okay, if this is a little bit technical for you on the computer, okay, which I understand, we're going to be yoga teachers, we're not always computer buffs. I also don't mind if you want to just type out what's happening in the pose and then WhatsApp me your pictures or your videos. And then you can say picture A refers to this. I have this and this going on in the pose. Picture 2, this is what's happening. If it's a little bit complex, okay. How do we feel about the structure of putting together those pose analysis? Any questions on that? Yes, Caroline.
What if you don't know how to get into the pose, number 1? And then number 2, let's say, this is just a general question. With something like, because I remember we spoke about flexibility and how things like bones could get in the way. Let's say you want to get into forward splits, right? and maybe you feel like a bone on bone sensation. You don't really know what's going on, but you just can't get into that. How do we know if our bodies just can't do that? Or so that's just question
And
number
this
2.
is really
Or
tough. So
can you give it more
coming to your first question, I'm hoping that I'll be able to help you to get in all your poses. And if it's something that we haven't covered, just say, oh, please can you show me how you get into Titibhasana, because I want to do it for my pose analysis, and I will show you how to get into the pose. If it's something we haven't covered already, just let me know, okay? Or WhatsApp me and I will help you with just kind of entry and stuff like that, so you know what you're doing. Most of them are also in the manual, but if you're choosing something extreme, it might not be. And then just ask and I'll help, okay? And then secondly, it's sometimes can be quite hard to identify, and we don't expect you to be like complete anatomy buffs and know exactly what's happening. So maybe you're coming into full splits and you can say, my front leg, I can feel a really strong stretch in my hamstring. It's tension. I can feel the pull. So I think it's because my hamstrings are tight. If it's a bone on bone thing, and you can just kind of think about it, just say, I don't actually feel a stretch, but it just feels compressive. It just feels like it just won't move. It's not necessarily sore or tight or stretching. It just feels like my joint has just stopped. And I think it might be because that's as far as my hip range goes. But then you're going to take it further and go, okay, what other poses do I do this shape in? So this is what's going to help you identify that. So in pyramid pose, I'm also stretching my front leg. I'm going to see how far I can go in pyramid pose. Oh, okay, that might be different. Or in a seated forward bend with my legs straight and just forward folding over the legs, Paschimottanasana, I can see my hamstrings are fine like this. So that's interesting. But when I come into splits, it might be something different. So take other poses, like you see in the videos, to kind of explore the same stretch or the same joint action or same shape of the pose, where you can maybe explore those kind of things around sensation and what's happening in the body. Does that
Thank
help?
you. That's very, very, very helpful, actually. So let's say, just to give an example, full splits will be fine, but then splits to the front is like, it's just not happening.
Yeah.
It's about, you're saying it's about finding other poses but that's, I mean, surely they're using the same with forward splits. You're externally rotating your hips.
Correct.
And then with side splits, full side splits, what is that again? You are extending as well as flex. You're also in hip flexion as well.
Correct.
So I mean, I'm just trying to understand how they're different and why on one hand it's fine, but then on the other, if you're
and it's such a great example, Caroline. It's the best example because they're both splits, but they're so vastly different. And just as you said, because when you're doing splits with one leg in flexion and one leg in extension, it's almost resembling the shapes of like, if we're looking at the category of poses, we're looking at it as a forward bend group of poses. So your warrior threes, your standing splits, all those actions where one leg is forwards and one leg is back, right? But now when you want to do what you call front facing splits with your legs out to the sides, now it's a completely different category of poses, just as you said, because now you've got external rotation. So completely different thing. So now you're looking at external rotation, how much range you have in your hip sockets in terms of joints. And because we're externally rotating, we've brought in inner thighs, groins, all of the inner legs, and how far you can open your legs out to the sides. So now you're more in a category of poses where you're looking at wide-legged forward fold, or with your legs out to the side, seated Upavishta, seated wide-legged forward fold. And those poses where your legs are open, and maybe you have to look at like butterfly pose with the soles of your feet together, and how much do my hips open? Look at firelog pose, external rotation poses. So actually so vastly different. So this was a great example, Caroline.
Thank you. That was very, very helpful. So I think it could be maybe a joint thing because I don't struggle with any of those poses. They're all quite easy. So it probably is a joint. It's probably a joint, or as you said, like a hamstring or something, that kind of.
And that's the
needs to be
exciting bit.
fixed up.
That's what you're going to analyze. Is it
Oh,
the
I see.
joint? Is it your external rotation? Or
Mm.
is it the muscle? Is it the stretching
Mm.
of the pose? So that's
Yes.
those are very flexibility based poses. Then if you were bringing in strength in some way, you would look at the strength element of the pose. Am I strong enough to do that? So you're absolutely spot on. And that's what
Thank
you'll
you.
be exploring with using other poses to look at, how can I assess my inner thigh stretch? How can I assess my external rotation mobility in other poses? And then look, okay, when I do splits, okay, this is what's happening. Now I know, because I can't do a wide-legged forward fold. Now I know I can't do sides. Well, you call it front splits. I call it side splits. The splits with your legs out to the sides. Okay.
Thank you. That looking at it from a category of poses really helps. So thank you.
Awesome. The category of poses is so helpful. And then going into your sequencing as well, the manual, I just find it so helpful, because even our 300-hour advanced teacher training, they were just like, categories of poses, what? Prep poses, progressions. But if you look at all those pictures and you just kind of scan through, you'll have forward bend category, back bend category, twist, arm balance, and inversion, and you can see how it all builds up and all the prep poses along the way. It makes it's such a lovely visual aid to make sense of all this categorizing. And most of the poses are in there. It's really helpful, and a great assist for your peak pose when you do sequencing with Taryn. It's going to help a lot. Okay. Any other questions? Thanks, Caroline. Those were some awesome questions, and really, I'm sure it helps everyone, because that was some great ones. Eleanor.
Yeah, sorry, hi. So let's say, like, I can do a back bend, but obviously there's a few ways you can get into a back bend. And if you can't get it, like, I haven't attempted going from standing, for example.
Ooh.
Is that something that I could use as a, because
Yeah.
I can go from the floor. I can go various ways from the floor, but I've got to doing it from standing.
I think that would be
So
awesome.
Is that something I could choose?
Yes, drop backs. Absolutely. And then you have to look at it in terms of, okay, I want to go from standing to dropping back into a back bend. What do I need in terms of flexibility? First of all, okay, so we know Eleanor's got them flexy shoulders. Okay, that's a huge component for full wheel. Okay, so we know, okay, that's why I'm looking at her and I'm saying go for it, because I've seen how she moves. So that's one component. Spinal extension, how far you can back bend. I've seen her move again. I know she can bend pretty far back. Okay, but now, Eleanor, what do we need in terms of strength to drop back? Because you don't just want to fall back onto your arms, right? You want to slowly drop back.
Yeah. I assume it's got to do with the legs, the quads or the hamstrings or something.
Spot on, your quads.
Okay.
Your legs,
Yeah.
your quads are working. They're eccentrically working. As you lower back, you're having to like deeply squat forwards. In order to bring yourself, first of all, closer to the floor, and also strong quads to slowly lower, that you don't just drop back hard on your hands, which is the scary part, right?
Yeah.
So that also brings in a bit of the
Yeah,
skill work,
yeah.
because now skilled, now we know what we're working with strength. Then you start to look at, okay, skill. And skill refers to a lot of what's going on. how are you thinking about where to place your body,
Yeah.
where to look, what to think, and also hugely overcoming fear, which I think is a big one for me at least,
Yeah.
in dropping backwards. It's
Yeah, for me too.
so how are we going to overcome the fear? So firstly, maybe we're just dropping back
Yeah.
onto like the couch. So a little bit less scary. Okay.
Okay.
So overcome that. And finding ways to be able to move towards dropping back with flexibility, strength, and then the skill work. And analyzing what you need in order to do that. And then if you can't do it, what other things you can do? A nice tip if you're going to choose it is do it with your heels on your blocks. So weirdly enough, because your heels are up, you're able to squat lower. I want to say squat, although it's a very strange squat. Your knees are going to go way past your feet. But because your heels are up on blocks, it makes it easier. And I know Catherine drops me back like that all the time, and it's huge fun. So in exploring using different props or using the wall, of course, you've done the wall walk down, but then we know that's not requiring any strength. It's nothing like the pose.
I'm scared to do even that.
Oh, okay. Well, that's then where it starts. For the skill work of just training my brain of how I'm walking back down the wall. And that's then where it starts. That it would be how you would modify a little bit the progression of a drop back. So tons of stuff to play with. Fun. Okay. Any other questions at this point? Okay. And sometimes you'll get to a point where you don't have an answer. That's also okay. Sasha.
I was just wondering if what happens. So for me, crow is it's just a difficult pose.
Yeah.
It's what I always struggled with. But then on, I don't know what it was, Thursday, I like almost got there. But so I was thinking, okay, I'll do crow for pose analysis. But what happens if I do it and like magically somehow I get it?
Cool. And that's probably likely because now you know what you're doing. And then just take it up a notch, Sasha, and do side crow. Because now I'm going to add okay, I can do crow now. I'm going to do side crow, make it a little bit harder.
Okay.
Or just take it a little notch higher. Or I'm going to do crow and maybe I'm going to do a hurdler's pose, like a splitty arm balance. Just take it one notch ahead.
Okay, thank you.
And that's maybe use this time now, just exploring what pose you want to do. Maybe you try it again and go, okay, I've nailed crow. I'm going to move on to something harder. Or you might be like, actually, I'm still totally freaked out. I'm going to do crow pose. And crow is a really awesome one to choose because remember, you've got so many things to work with. So if we look at crow, Zani, I'm going to come to you in a sec. In terms of flexibility, what kind of flexibility do we need in order to get into the shape of crow pose?
Hip flexor.
What are we doing with our legs?
Abducting.
Yes. So you're externally rotating your hips, right? So that you're able to squat nice and low. So you might do a little bit of stretching in your inner thighs. And then what are we doing in terms of the spine? Do we need to do much?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we can all round our spines because it's a very functional movement. We bend down. So we're rounding the spine a bit. So not huge flexibility work, right? But then we got to work a little bit of strength coming into crow. So what kind of strength do we need in order to do crow pose?
Tricep.
Yes. Okay. We need arm strength. And what else?
Wrists.
Wrists. Okay. So then we look at the pose in terms of, okay, I need a bit of strength to do this pose. And what's a really cool way when we talk in terms of flexibility and strength, it's quite nice to use almost like a sliding scale. Between 1 to 5, how much strength do you need in terms of strength for your arms for crow pose? Between 1 and 5. That's not like major, but we need a bit of strength, maybe like 3 or 4, yeah? In terms of flexibility, so not like tons of flexibility. We just need to be able to squat and kind of get into the pose. So on a sliding scale between 1 and 5, how much flexibility do we need for crow? Maybe like 2. Yeah. And then in terms of skill work, where to look, where to place your arms, how far to lean. Between 1 and 5, how much skill work is required? Do we say 5? 4 or 5. So crow pose is mostly, you need a bit of strength, right? A little bit of flexibility, but pretty much everyone can get there. But a huge amount of skill work. So this also really helps you for your pose analysis and well as sequencing, is break down those 3 components which you need into that sliding scale, and it's going to help you a lot. It's a really cool thing, and one of our students actually came up with it on one of our courses, and now we use it all the time because it's awesome. Okay, cool, Sasha. Thank you.
Thank you.
Zani, and then we'll come to you next, Jimmy.
I've got this very rounded upper back. So when I do, for instance, cat, it can round like really badly. So could one of my practices be to get a better C curve, or is that more Pilates style type thing?
So it's not rounding badly, Zani. It's just your back just rounds easier there.
It looks like
yeah.
This like
You just get round a lot, and that might be really useful. You know what it's useful for? For doing poses if your hips are very flexy, for getting things like trying to put your foot behind your head, or poses where you have to really round your back. That's going to be insanely useful.
Okay.
It's not a bad thing. It just is.
And work again. Okay.
Yeah. Maybe what you would like watch out for is if your back rounds a lot. Say now when we want to do something where the spine is more in a lengthened position and we don't want like crazy rounding in the spine, you would take a pose more to work on finding length in the spine. But I don't see it as a problem, Zani.
Okay.
Not a bad thing.
Thanks. I'm a little bit scared of all of that, so that's why I'm asking.
No, it's totally fine. Sometimes it can be really useful.
All right.
All good. And then we'll see, like, again, when you choose your 3 poses, I'll go, okay, Zani, why have you chosen this pose? And it might be, oh, because I feel like my back is doing something bad. And I'll go, no, that's fine. Don't worry about it. So that's also why I'm going to check in with you guys. Okay. Demi?
So I have a similar question to Sasha. So I struggle with arm bends. My arms, arm balances. My arms are very weak. But I can do crow for like a second, where before the start of this course, I couldn't do it at all. But now it's almost like I would like to, instead of maybe doing side crow because I can't even hold the pose, maybe could you focus on say, okay, I can do it, but let's see if I can hold it for longer.
Yeah, you absolutely can. But I also think, Demi, you just over the next few weeks, you're going to be able to hold it for longer. Seeing as you've got your feet off the floor, which is kind of the hardest part because you've done the skill work now and you figured out how far you needed to lean, where to look, where to place your arm. Pretty much the biggest, most important thing you've kind of got already. So I would say if you're managing to get your crow, you're going to be holding it for longer soon anyway. Take it a little bit further. Choose something maybe a bit harder to challenge yourself.
Okay, and I know you said so, but would you, like, for example, inversions are extremely frightening for me. I've never really done one before. In my yoga class, it's always, oh, if you can do it, if you can't, just stay in downward dog. And I'm always like, oh, okay, I'll stay in downward dog. But, you know, is that something that you would advise trying for this?
Yes. So I highly recommend it, actually. Don't worry, I'm going to teach you how to do it. That is not going to be super scary, okay? Because first of all, I think inversions are great because you are going to do them for your assessment at the end of the course. It doesn't mean you need to kick up into a handstand in the middle of the room and balance. No, we're going to start off and do it progressively. And basically what you're going to do, so say now, Demi, you wanted to choose an inversion. I'm going to say, start with plank and walk your feet up the wall. And do handstand like this first. Okay. And then you're going to slowly go, okay, I'm building my arm strength Sorry, my battery wasn't plugged in. I'm building my arm strength and I'm overcoming my fear by just doing plank handstand with my feet up the wall. Okay. And that might be scary enough. And then maybe you walk your hands closer to the wall and you get straighter and straighter. And then I'll also show you the other versions when you're going to kick up against the wall and all the rest, but you're going to have options. So I highly recommend you choose either a handstand, or the other one we do is headstand, but we do it with our head off the floor so you don't put weight on your neck. We call it headless headstand. I'll explain this in more detail. But yes, Demi, I would say take like a headless headstand or handstand. If it's something you've never done before and we need to be able to do these for your final review, just like you did now, if that's okay, plank on the wall. It doesn't need to be super scary. I promise it's not scary. All of you could do that right now, the second, and be completely fine. Okay. But yeah, definitely, Demi, I recommend it. So one of those, go for it. And I will guide you through it that you feel totally safe and that you've got options. And pretty much all our online courses, and you don't think it's going to happen, but every single person has gotten up into an inversion. From never being able to do one before to be able to doing them quite comfortably. So I know it's like, oh my God, super scary right now. Don't worry about it. Don't worry at all. So don't wind yourself up either, because it's not so bad. You'll be able to do it. Okay, and I'll help you every step of the way. Sasha.
So I'm in a very similar situation to Demi with that. But I saw on the online, sort of with all the classes, all the courses, that there is a handstand program.
Yes.
Are we going to use that, or are we going to do it live, like with you?
So that's something you can do on your own. Okay.
Okay.
This is what Catherine specializes in. She's fantastic. She's the handstand queen, I call her. I recommend having a look at it. And it's also on our Instagram account. And it's progressive ways to build strength for handstand. Hugely strength-based for your arms, and building skill work, kicking up for handstands. So yes, I highly recommend you do the program in your own time. Okay. Don't exhaust yourselves, like tie it in if you can fit it in. If you can do a little bit of handstand work every day or every second day, it's going to be hugely helpful to build your strength. And then you'll overcome that fear around inversions also. So have a look at that, and especially useful if you choose handstand as one of your poses you want to analyze. There's tons of ideas on how you can work the pose. So yes, go for it, Sasha. Okay.
Thank you.
And they're very well guided, so you'll know exactly what's going on. And if you're unsure or anything, just send me a picture or a video or ask for any help along the way. Sama.
I have just a short question. With the poses, some of them I struggle to hold them for long. So how do you make that part of the analysis? Like, for example, with like a low lunge, I quickly feel maybe I can hold it for a minute or two. But if it goes a little bit further, I have to almost straighten it just to relax and then go back into it again.
So Sam, it depends on the pose, but I think that's often just building up strength to be able to hold the poses for longer. And that's going to even come just by doing the poses in the courses with me. If it was something like Warrior 3, I can't hold my balance for really long and I want to work on being able to hold this pose, then I would say maybe more relevant. But something for like lunges and things, that's just going to be a bit of building up some basic strength. And I would say try and choose something a little bit more challenging so that you have a little bit more to work on in terms of breaking down the pose into that flexibility, strength, and skill work.
Okay.
Because you're going to get stronger and you'll be able to hold those poses. Don't you worry, you'll see.
No, because I have, besides holding, it's also this balancing situation. Like I struggled even to walk straight. So I had to really practice really hard to do that. I'm one of those people that trip quite often. So I have a lot of balancing, just general issues with balancing.
Maybe it'll be nice to choose a balancing pose. So you can bring this in for one of your poses. But choose something maybe like dancer or, half moon or warrior 3, just to challenge it a little bit so that you can also look at terms of what's happening in my legs, what's happening in my back, what's happening in my arms, as well as your balance and stability and being able to hold the pose.
Okay, no, because I already had dance as one of my poses because I know it's an issue. So yeah.
Perfect. So bring that in as well. What helps me to find balance and stability? Is it the drishti? Is it being aware of what's happening in my bottom foot? That because pushing down through your big toe can also be really helpful to feel more stable and balanced on your foot, and just explore that as well, Zama. Okay. Exciting. Demi?
Sorry, Zama kind of triggered another question for me. So just as I'm confused between what you may think which direction I should go towards. So doing inversion, something I've never really done before, I'm very scared of. Don't even know where I would fix myself because I've never really done it before. So there's a lot I can explore. Or doing something like, I know like my hamstrings are very tight. So there's a few things like pigeon. I understand pigeon. I know where I'm going wrong, but I can't do it still. So would that just maybe, should I leave something like that more for just repetition and over time and do the thing that I have never tried before, or do the thing that I know but can't do properly?
So lucky you've got 3 options. So I'll often say choose an inversion, choose something that you just struggle with, and it might be pigeon or mermaid, something like that. And then either like an arm balance or a back bend. And sometimes some people choose all inversions and arm balances, sometimes a back bend, an arm balance, and an inversion. But it kind of depends, Demi. So I think choose, and this is what you'll WhatsApp me as well for me to check, because I will see you in all those poses next Saturday, and I'll go, oh, no, pigeon's fine. Don't worry about that. That's going to come in time. But if it's something you're really struggling with, then that's totally fine to take. So you've got 3 poses. Choose one as an inversion. Now I'm making you do it.
Okay. I'm so scared. I'm even trying to like.
I know you're talking yourself out of it. I can see what's happening. It's a done deal. You're doing an inversion.
Okay. I'm literally going red.
You're gonna be fine. I'll show you how to do it. You'll be completely safe. I promise. I wouldn't make you do it if you weren't going to be. Demi, as you are now, okay, because now you've worked yourself up. Go to a wall and do what I did with your feet on the wall. Just take a downward dog with your bum to the wall. Okay. And walk your feet on the wall.
You want to see me?
It would be great. Only if you can. If you don't want us to see you, that's also fine.
I just need you to quickly move something so I can move this.
Okay. We'll wait. We'll chat to Trudy first, and then we're coming back to you because now we're just tackling that first straight away so it doesn't grow. Trudy?
I want to find out what exactly. Oh, sorry.
Go for it, Trudy.
Did you want to say so? Oh.
No, she's just getting herself.
Yeah. So if we say peak pose, I'm just trying to figure out how do we define something as a peak pose? Could it be anything? Because what I'm thinking is, and also, so the other part of the question is this pose that we're analyzing. Does it have to be something like a peak pose, and something like lotus, Padmasana be a peak pose?
Yes, absolutely.
And, yeah, because I mean that's something. Yeah, but yeah.
So in terms of peak pose sequencing your first question, you want to have chosen something more intermediate to advanced. So it gives you a lot of components to work with, Trudy. So we can see how you can break down a pose and put together a sequence for it. So we're going to encourage you to choose something a little bit more challenging. You're not going to choose like downward dog, or you're not going to choose high lunge. You're going to choose something a little bit more complex. Okay. And then in terms of your pose analysis, it doesn't need to necessarily be something super hard. Sometimes it can be an easy pose that you just struggle with. It could be downward facing dog. Listen, I really struggle with down dog. I want to look what's going on on my back and my hips and my legs. And then yes, lotus could also be a peak pose to sequence for more advanced students. Okay, lotus, unfortunately, you kind of already need huge amounts of external rotation in your hips. If you don't naturally have that bone structure, lotus could be potentially sore and niggly for your knees. So lotus, unfortunately, isn't an accessible pose for everyone. Even in terms of like, we say maybe like a hard arm balance isn't accessible for everyone, but there's a lot you can do along the way. Lotus, a little bit harder because you kind of need hugely flexible external rotation, massive ranges of movement to do it safely. So it's not a pose I often teach, but sometimes truly I would take a pose like in our advanced course. I don't do like full lotus, but I'll take half lotus, which is a little bit more accessible, and maybe do half lotus in side plank and find that bind in half lotus. Or, you know, you've also, in your Ashtanga, you've got that Ardha Baddha Padmottanasana where you bring your leg into lotus standing and you forward fold. That could be used as a peak pose. And you've got a few more components to work with in terms of hamstrings, the forward fold, the external rotation, and it kind of buffs up your class a little bit more other than just taking full lotus. Because if someone walks into your class and has a sore knee and you've planned just to do lotus for an hour, it's not going to be the nicest thing. I mean, for you, it would be fine. But for literally 95% of people, it's really, and we're going to chat loads about lotus. It's not the safest pose or the most accessible. You really need to have flexible hips, and it's not a choice. We'd all love to have those kind of hips, but our hips only go as far as the bone structure allows for it. To answer your question in a very roundabout.
For this, absolutely. But like for this pose analysis that we're doing on ourselves, would it be like, could I take lotus and then maybe then determine, okay, I probably won't be able to do it because my bones are pointing, hips are pointing in the wrong direction or whatever.
For your own body,
for my own,
go for it. Yes.
Cool.
Go for it. If you want to analyze, can I do lotus or can't I do lotus? Cool. Absolutely go for it. Okay. Other questions? Just where we're at the moment.
I know that we're waiting to see Demi's inversion.
Yes, thank you for reminding me. I almost forgot. Okay, Demi, have a look here first. Okay, it's not scary at all. If anyone else wants to join in, it's huge fun and it's so much fun. Okay, what you're going to do is you're just going to have your bum towards the wall. Do like a little downward dog and put your feet towards the wall. Okay, that's it. You can come with me if you want, Demi. Okay. And then you're going to bend your knees because those hamstrings are going to work a bit here. And just take one foot up onto the wall. Okay? And then just see if you can bring the other foot off and put it back down. Just lift the other foot and put it back down. Just start there. Maybe then you want to put both feet on the wall. Just think of it. It's like plank. You're doing plank with your feet up the wall. So one foot goes up. There you are. And then put it down. Okay? You didn't die. It's okay. She's still alive. She's still alive. Okay. Now try again. And now, yay! Now walk your feet a bit higher up the wall. You're still okay. Oh, look, she's already got one leg in the air. There you are. Then look forwards at your hands so then the world's not upside down. Yeah. Boom, you're in a handstand. Look, you've done an inversion. Yay! Look, you're still alive. I think she's crying a bit.
It's so crazy how your head kind of, in your mind, you immediately like, I'm going to topple over, I'm going to topple over, I'm going to topple over. And then I think to myself, how will I fall? But now I'm thinking about how I'm falling before I'm thinking about doing it. So it's,
normal. So how do you feel?
It helps to look forward, definitely. I don't feel like I'm going to topple in on
Exactly.
myself. I think, yeah, it's also just such a foreign movement. Whenever are we upside down?
I
So-
know. So everything you've just described and everything you're experiencing in terms of the fear, in terms of being upside down, all of these things is completely normal. And this is what everyone experiences, unless you did gymnastics as a kid and went upside down a lot. We don't normally go upside down. It's totally unnatural. So this is why handstands are all about overcoming the fear and knowing where to look, because if you look forwards, nothing's upside down and it's less scary. And it also will help your balance later on. So drishti is a major thing. And we can find so many different ways to go upside down that we can slowly let our mind overcome the fear of being upside down. And it's called proprioception, how your brain understands where you are in space, just as when we're upright. But when we go upside down, our brain goes, whoa, I have no idea where we are and what we're doing. Everything's weird. And the more you do it, the more your brain goes, oh, okay, this is all right. This is not so bad. I understand where my feet are, where my arms are, my orientation. And then once your mind overcomes it, the skill work, everything becomes better. And now it's going to be quite fun. I bet you want to do it again, hey?
I'm definitely going to do it again later.
Well done, Demi, for jumping into that. Excellent. Because I know it's not so bad. So I don't want her to like frazzle her mind up thinking it's going to be so much worse than what it really is. And Zani joined you there, and Zani went upside down, and that was pretty fun. Hey, Zani?
It was my first time too, yeah. It was fun.
So you can do inversions just by walking your feet up the wall in plank, and that's where it begins for strength and for the skill work of understanding what to do and how to feel upside down.
I think you guys have just inspired me to try as well.
Come,
I've
Zama, we'll
always
do
had
it with
this
you.
No, I already do now. I'm not in a
Oh,
state.
okay. Well, you can see it's not so bad. There's a wall behind you. I can see it.
Yeah. I was just thinking about how during the week I was freaking out about doing crow, and as I was practicing it every second day, I realized that it was more in my mind than anywhere else.
Exactly. And this is why yoga is not only physical, it's also so mental as well.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay, so we'll have a whole session on inversions and doing them safely at home on your own, that you are safe, I promise.
Yeah, I just want to say to Zama, I know I said it on WhatsApp, but when she typed on the WhatsApp group saying that she did it, that whole first few days, I think it was the first Monday or so, I was really frustrated, feeling like I'm never going to do this. I've never done it before. Why do I think I'm just going to do it? And now I've been practicing so much that when you said you have bruises, I have little bruises on my arms now. And she inspired me to just do it. And then I actually got it. So thanks, Zama.
And now you've inspired Zama to go and do
Now
it.
you've inspired me to do inversions too.
Thank you.
Oh, that's so sweet, man. Any other questions at this point? Helene?
I just want to go back a little bit to the earlier conversation. I can do chaturanga fairly easily, having to do them a lot in Ashtanga with crow. And I wonder, in terms of strength, strength doesn't, I'm sure I can be stronger in all sorts of ways, but it doesn't seem to be the primary issue here, because I always wonder, why can I do chaturanga, but I can't do crow? Is it just a skill thing? Probably.
You're so right, Helene. You are so right. So chaturanga requires way more strength. Actually, more strength than a handstand, by the way. But crow requires way more skill work, just as you said. because you have to know where to place your knees. First of all, that you create that shelf, which takes a lot of skill work to figure out. Then the skill work to look forwards and lean forwards. Boom, there's a little bit of a fear factor because now you're leaning forwards and it feels like your face is going to find the floor. So there's a little bit of mental work to overcome with that. And then you have to find how much you need to lean forwards in order to lift your feet off the floor. So crow is all skill work. And you clearly you have the strength from chaturanga. And now you just have to explore crow. How far do I need to lean forwards, look forwards and find the ideal positioning for the knees to rest on the arms like a shelf, and finding that balance of all those components.
And I think it again is a question of confidence and your mind. I mean, the thing with the inversion, I would never have like ever imagined that I could. It was always my biggest dream in life. And then I was in a class once, and the teacher just came and she just flipped my feet up and she held me upside down. And it was probably the best day of my life. But then it's taken me many years still to get away from the wall, and then now just getting my legs up into just sort of bent legs headstand, and like without touching the wall. Like that took another few years, and now I can go up into straight headstand, but I still need the wall behind me. I'm still scared that I'm gonna fall backwards, which I feel constantly as if I will, but now I can just sort of tap the wall and then I come back and I'm okay.
You know it's there. Yes. So Helene, that's exactly such a beautiful process of showing the skill work over time and how you had to figure out where your balance is in that, overcoming the fear most of all, because the fear actually is the biggest thing that holds us back. But the more we do it, the more we overcome the fear. So that's a great example of the skill for those poses.
Yeah.
And
for me, it was sorry, go ahead.
No, you talk.
No, for me, it was actually a core strengthening thing to get my bum up and my legs up in that without jumping, just sort of walking myself in and then bringing my legs up.
Without using momentum to kind of throw yourself against the wall. Yes.
Yeah, I don't want to do that because that it's not controlled. And if I throw myself against the wall, then I will never do it without the wall. For me, it has to work with the muscles helping me up and then keeping me up.
And this is less scary when you do it controlled and slowly, because then you can kind of, it's less scary than throwing your legs up against the wall. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing, Helene. Okay, so how are we feeling about this pose analysis? So we take a couple more examples to explore. Okay, so let's explore something like, let's see what I had here. Let's take something that's quite advanced. Okay, so flying pigeon pose. If you're unfamiliar with this pose, it is in your manual. If you just want to have a look, it is something we will talk about. Let me just find the page number. It's called Ekapada Galavasana. On page 131, just so you can kind of see what I'm looking at, because it might be a pose you haven't attempted before, because it's quite hard. It's actually seriously hard. But because there's so much going on in this pose, it's a really fun one to analyze, because it's not something where you're just standing in Tadasana and there's not really much happening. This pose, there are tons of things happening in terms of flexibility, strength, as well as skill work. At page 131. Do you find it there? It's called Ekapada Galavasana. Can you see the shape? So what's happening there is there's chaturanga arms. Okay, chaturanga, there you are. Demi's also got that picture there on her phone, if you don't have your manual in front of you. Okay, Demi, hold it there. I'll make you big so everyone, just in case no one has their manual. Can you see? So chaturanga arms. The front leg is in pigeon. Okay, so he's resting his foot over his arms in pigeon, and the back leg is back like warrior 3. Okay, thanks, Demi. Very helpful. Okay, so in terms of flexibility, okay, so now we're breaking down the pose. We've got the front leg in pigeon, back leg back in extension, and chaturanga arms. Okay, let's look at the flexibility component of this pose first. What muscles are stretching in order to come into the shape in terms of our front leg? What's happening?
Hip flexor in external rotation.
Your hips are in hip flexion and external rotation. Absolutely, Sasha. Okay. So
Is it kind of like sorry.
Talk.
Is it like, it looks to me almost like a pigeon, in a forward fold in a pigeon. Is that sort of the, okay.
You're completely right. So that is it. So pigeon would be a good prep pose for that front leg, right? What other poses look the same as that Galavasana? It's got a pigeon leg. What other shapes do we have external rotation in the front leg like that with our leg crossed over?
That figure 4 one where you lie on your back?
Yes, Celine, figure 4 pose. Figure 4 pose really looks so much like that, okay? And also a standing figure 4, like we did in the class today, if I remember correctly. Before we went back into dances, we crossed our ankle over the thigh and went into standing figure 4. So those would be great places for us to analyze if you are able to do the flexibility component of this pose. On a scale of 1 to 5, how much flexibility is required to be able to get into that shape? About 4 or 5. It's when you feel it. Caroline's got really flexible hips, so maybe less for her. When you feel this pose, which I'm making it harder for you guys because you haven't felt what's going on. But you come into figure 4 and you squat all the way towards the floor in a figure 4 position. And huge amounts of flexibility is required in external rotation to keep your foot hooked on your arms. So basically it's like you can do, it's really fun to break it down in lots of ways like this. I can do seated figure 4 and try and find that shelf like this, right? So this is often how I prep for this pose. And then I'm going to do it again in a standing figure 4 and I'm going to hook. And then to come into the pose, I have to put my hands on the floor in a figure 4 pose. And that is going to give a huge, big bum stretch to externally rotate that hip to just even get your hands onto the floor, regardless of the next component of making it an arm balance. Okay. Then in terms of strength, okay, what do you think we need to be, what strength is required in this pose? Let's look at the arms. Yes, triceps, arms. That chaturanga arm strength, because the arms are like in chaturanga shape, right? So we need to be able to do a fairly good chaturanga. And then what else is being strengthened? What is working in this pose? Cherise? Wrists. Yes. You're going to take a lot of weight onto your wrists. You're leaning your whole body forwards onto your hands. What else?
That back leg really has to be.
Yes. And Caroline, did you also want to say back leg?
I would say glutes as well.
Yes. Yes, your back leg. And it's insane. And we'll do this pose next weekend and you'll feel it. Your glutes and your hamstrings of that back leg have to work so hard to take your leg up at the back. So like warrior 3, like we did last night, you felt that leg having to work to the muscles taking the leg back into hip extension. Well, the muscles that do hip extension, glutes and hamstrings, are contracting big time. So first of all, how can we assess if someone is strong enough in their arms to do this pose? What other poses could we assess strength? First, just a basic one.
What about a normal plank?
Yes, absolutely. Plank. You need to be able to hold plank. If you or your students couldn't hold plank, you know this pose ain't going to happen. Right? And then what other arm poses, what else can we do to assess our tricep strength, our arm strength, our wrist strength?
Chaturanga.
Chaturanga, absolutely. And the looking forwards and leaning forwards component with arm strength, what other pose were we talking about earlier?
Crow.
Crow. So crow would be a nice way to see if you can lift your feet off in crow. It's all going to resemble the same sensation of leaning forwards and being able to lift your feet for this flying pigeon. Okay. Then in terms of strength for the back leg, how can we assess, or what other shapes can we do? I mean, everyone can pretty much lift their leg at the back, pretty much. What other positions can we do taking our leg back behind us to resemble the same muscle contractions like you will have for your back leg?
Standing splits or half moon?
Yes, standing splits would be great. Half moon, you're externally rotated, so a little bit different. But standing splits, yes, your leg is back behind you. And what else? Similar to standing splits where the leg goes up at the back.
Warrior 3.
Warrior 3, absolutely. And
Half moon.
half moon, remember you're externally rotating. So your leg is actually lifting to the side. It's actually the hip is abducting and it isn't behind you. So half moon's a little bit different. More think in terms of warrior 3, standing splits. What else? One more.
Aeroplane.
Three-legged dog.
Three-legged dog. Yes,
Answer.
no, absolutely. Three-legged dog. So I would definitely put those poses into my sequence and go, that's how your back leg is going to feel later on when you try and lift it up. Okay. So we looked at the pose in terms of flexibility. So we spoke about pigeon, figure 4, standing figure 4, all kind of those kind of shapes, which we would do in a sequence, right? We looked at it in terms of strength. So we brought in plank, maybe a chaturanga to feel that bending of the arms, and a crow to kind of assess. And then we also looked at it in terms of strength of the back leg, lifting in warrior 3, standing splits, and three-legged dog. Okay. Now let's move on to skill work. On a scale of 1 to 5, how much skill work do you think is required for this pose? 4 or 5, yeah. So again, like crow pose. Okay, this one is now requiring flexibility and strength, a lot more strength than crow. But you're having to really lean forwards a lot. Okay. Look forwards, lean forwards, and then also a huge component is figuring out where to put your legs to balance on your arms and then lift your back leg up at the back. So there's a huge amount of skill work required to know how much to lean forwards, how far you need to look forwards, where to place your arms, how does it feel when you take your leg back, and also all arm balances are levers, okay? So that, imagine like a seesaw. If you lean forwards on the one side, then the legs lift, right? Put your legs down, you take the weight off your hands. Like crow pose. When you lean forwards, your feet lift off the floor, right? So in this pose, how is this a bigger lever? Why do you need to lean more forwards? More forwards than crow. What was that, Charisse? It's good sign language there.
the back leg is straight, so you've got more weight.
Exactly. Absolutely 100%. Because your back leg is straight behind you, it's a longer lever. So here's my arms, here's my leg, all this weight. I have to lean so much more to account for that extra weight of the straight back leg behind you. And that requires a huge amount of skill work because now your face is going to get pretty close to the floor if you want to get that leg straight up at the back. So you have to adjust accordingly to what's happening in the pose. Well done, Charisse. Okay. So is that kind of making sense how we're breaking down poses? Do you guys have any questions at this point on how we're breaking it down? Okay. Caroline?
I'll just want to be clear on how we will present this pose analysis, because you know, for example, for the first component, we spoke about flexibility, and what we did now was we mentioned other poses that are in the same category or use similar technique, or you know, so in our pose analysis, we would say in this pose we need this much flexibility, and should we refer to how we'd sequence it, or should we just say that other poses similar to this is figure 4 pigeon?
Yeah.
Or would we say?
It always depends on the pose, and that'll help you clarify exactly how much of other poses you're going to bring in. So if it's something like crow, you're not going to be using a hell of a lot of other poses to reference. You're more going to be in crow and then working different versions within crow. If you're taking something like this Ekapada Galavasana flying pigeon, you've kind of got more to assess. So you're going to look at your front leg in figure 4 a bit more. You're going to look at the back leg, and then you can bring that in. You're going to be doing that exact thing with sequencing. So you're kind of moving in that way. So yes, Caroline, if it's relevant for your pose, bring in other poses to experience what you need in terms of flexibility and strength as well. So I feel like I'm not strong enough for this pose, so I'm going to look at my chaturanga. I can actually do chaturanga, so maybe I'm just not leaning forwards enough, and then you can kind of refer back to it.
So we're not referring to sequencing in this pose analysis. We don't say I would, okay.
And that's the next step. You're welcome to if you want, Caroline. You can take it as far as you want to. So if you want to say in terms of sequencing, I would have prepped for this by doing this, this, and this. Awesome, go for it. But that's exactly what you're going to be doing with Taryn in your next sequencing assignment. But definitely start to think in that way. So I'm glad you're thinking in that direction, because that is the purpose of this assignment, to help you just to break down into those different, what's happening in the pose in terms of all those components.
So just to be clear, the intention behind pose analysis is to just express what is needed to come into this pose.
Pretty much, yes. So okay. The points you want to make note of is, of course, the flexibility, the strength, and the skill work. Then the modifications or progressions of the pose, and how does my body work in this pose? So then it's making it personal for you. So those are kind of the 5 things you're looking at. Flexibility, strength, progression, so making it easier or harder, depending on you, and how does your body fit into the pose. Oh, and then skill work was the other one. Does that help, Caroline?
Thank you.
Okay, and if you get a little confused, you can look at the examples. Some of them are quite simple and straightforward, where some of them are a little bit more complex. It always depends on the pose, depending on how far you can take it. The more complex the pose, the more you have to kind of look at and analyze. The simpler the pose, sometimes a little bit less. Okay. And if you get confused, please feel free to WhatsApp me and ask. I'm here to help. Zani?
First, an observation. Trudy once said that she has a yoga journal, and I was often like, okay, why? But I think I now get why. A yoga journal is quite something nice to have, because you could potentially do stuff like this with your poses and your practice. So that's the observation. And then the question was, it's got more to do with sequencing, so perhaps it's out of place, but do we try to fit our sequence into an hour? Like, let's say a sequence just takes 15 minutes. Do we just repeat the poses over and over, or?
So Taryn is going to guide you through all of this. Okay. So first of all, you're going to you'll talk to her about it tomorrow. You'll look at all your prep poses, just breaking it down, kind of like how we chatted about it today. And then you will look in terms of adding in transitioning poses, how you link all of that in a flow, and then how you would stretch it out for an hour-long class. Yes, but you've jumped a little bit ahead, but you will be, can you see how this is already making you think for peak pose sequencing? And that is why we do this, because it's the start of a peak pose. If you decide to choose our flying pigeon as your peak pose, you'll break it down just as we did now. And then you've kind of already got all your poses of how you would prep. And then you would just add to that, Zani, to link it and flow it and bring in all the stuff, which you'll do with Taryn. Cool. Any other questions? Feeling all right? Is this making sense? You feel okay with what you're doing for your 3 pose analysis? Okay. So just start to brainstorm, because you've got a bit of time for this. Think about what poses you would like to do. Okay, WhatsApp me if you want to check. But remember, next week we'll do a review, and I'm going to tell you if I need you to work on anything. But in the meantime, kind of have 3 poses in mind. I often say an inversion is good, an arm balance, and a back bend. I mean, but it depends on you. It depends what you want to work on. It might be more arm balances, it might be more inversion, it might be a standing pose, it might be a seated pose, it might be downward facing dog. So it does depend on what you feel that you want to explore a bit more and what you struggle with. Okay. Feeling all right? Excited. It's going to be so fun. All right. If there isn't anything else, I'll see you guys tomorrow morning, and we'll continue from there. Okay. Have a lovely evening. Well done today.
You too. Thank you so much, Laura.
Pleasure. Have a nice evening. See you tomorrow. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye.